Hopefully if we get...
Okay, wait, it's 4 minutes plus 1, not 5 minutes.
It's 4 minutes.
Plus 1, that's true.
Plus 1 question. And it worked well last time, so we're hoping it'll work out this time. Is there any questions?
Move one of the
second slides like this, right? These slides are really, really fast.
I did. I think someone else from this section. I bet Sylvia doesn't use one too. Right now I think there's 3 and 3. I think one person from each has a Oh, another thing, please don't leave before the end of class. It makes a lot of noise when you leave and it's kind of rude. So, yeah, just don't. Is this work? Oh, it works. Okay. So, the first group can start Franklin. I think the down arrow is next.
Can we go to the next slide because we
Click the same slide.
we link to another group of slides.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys will.
Okay, just one. This
Okay.
Yeah. But you know, it's
Yeah,
like,
whatever.
if the link works, it's fine. It's fine.
It's public anyways.
So there's no more.
Yeah. Just hit the one. Oh, wow.
You guys can start now.
Okay, hi, so my name is Franklin, and this is my partner, Taktar, and we are tackling the pedestrian tracking problem. So what is tracking? So tracking is like identifying the location of an object using a camera. And so we just narrowed it down to the pedestrian part. And so how do we actually test it? So we actually crop a bounding box around the intended pedestrian or pedestrians. And then we play the video, and we hope that this box stays on the specified pedestrian throughout the entire video. So some challenges that we ran into, we have the illumination problem where the pixel intensity values change. We also ran into occlusion problems where the two pedestrians might walk in front of each other, and how do you know which bounding box was with which pedestrian? And then the object speed. So if a pedestrian is moving too fast, it might be really hard to keep track.
Here's a list of algorithm we have applied in this project. We'll go through it quickly. SIF, the main idea is just like try to map the key point from frame to frames. But the problem is if we automatically generate a key point, it will map the background to background, which makes the tracking static. And if we manually label it, we're going to have the number of the key point decrease by time. Next algorithm is weight regression. We label the pixel outside the bounding box as 0 and inside S1, and we conduct a few samplings. The problem is when we detect, not the whole body is detected, which makes it difficult to identify the bounding box in the next frame. Next algorithm is MIL. The basic idea is just like use the classifier and through the negative samplings. We use the algorithm from the OpenCV library as a baseline. And the drawback of this algorithm that we found is when the occlusion occurs, the positive part will be labeled as another pedestrian, which makes it very difficult to track. The main algorithm that we use in this project is KCF with the DFT. So let's start with the important property of the discrete Fourier transforms. The first one is when we convolute two images in the normal space, we can compute the same thing but with the element-wise product in the Fourier space, which make it like much faster runtime. And also in the Fourier space, we can translate the object vertically and horizontally very efficiently, which can generate more training set with fewer samples. And KCF part, we separate it into the training algorithm and testing algorithm. For training algorithm, we applied kernel tricks. So instead of like actually calculate feature vector, we calculate like the coefficient for each sample, which can calculate from the kernelized rich regression. and then we can just apply the Fourier transform to make it compute faster. For the testing part is very similar. We just like multiply the kernel metrics with the coefficient we found, and just like get the bounding box for the high score. This is like a very high level implementation for the training part, and respond based on the mathematical derivations on the first slide. And let's look at some samples. Let's go for one of them. Seems like internet here is slow. Let's actually let's go for the quantitative result first, and then we will come back for the video.
So we have the quantitative results. In general, you see that KCF is more successful than MIL. However, in these last two, you can see that the results for either are not very promising at all. This is when there's like a complete occlusion, which is really hard to deal with, and then also the fast movement, which is like the pedestrian moves too fast. And then so possible future work. So right now we're actually trying to implement two things, which is motion-based KCF, which is looking at the last couple of.
Yeah, so this is the last slide. So.
Good. Yeah, no worries. No worries. Any questions?
Yeah, any question? We don't have time to actually run the video, so it's fine.
We just plain play it with no question.
Yeah.
But if it's not, I'll do that. Wait, how are we on? How are we presenting?
It's don't touch that.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay.
Don't worry, guys. We'll watch it.
Okay. Thank you.
Alright, next group.
This is that clicker.
How do I get to the next slide?
Alright, my name is Antti Q, and I'll be talking about my project, which is depth reconstruction using forced camera oscillations. Which button?
Down.
Okay, so I'm going to explain the depth estimation problem first, which we've also gone over in class. Let's say we have a 3D point. Now we use a camera to capture an image. Let's move the camera to the right and capture another image. Notice how the point is in different locations between the two images. We can use these locations combined with what we know about where the camera were to deduce the 3D location of the point. This is essentially how depth from stereo works. Here's an example. The pictures on the top are captured from different locations, and the picture in the lower left is a raw depth estimate. In the lower right, they made a clear depth map by regularizing the raw data. To obtain an estimate like this, we need to figure out which points in one picture correspond to the other. This correspondence process introduces a trade-off in selecting the baseline length. So the problem with the wide baseline, as you can see here, is that it can be difficult to form a correspondence with an object if the left camera sees one side of it and the right camera sees the other. On the other hand, with a small baseline, you have easy correspondences but worse depth resolution. For example, this is an advantage with the large baseline. The lines in this diagram correspond to pixels on the camera. For a 3D point, as you can see, when we have these two cameras, knowing the pixel location of the point can give us a reasonably good estimate of the location, which is this kite. Now, if we move them closer, the kite gets longer, and we can't estimate the depth as well. And so now the problem is, can we get a better depth from a small baseline? We can see that in nature, objects naturally tend to vibrate. So my proposal is to take a camera and vibrate it as we take a video, and use this to average over oscillations and get a better depth estimate. So to do this, if we take a feature in space and we project it onto the camera image plane, the disparity can be written as some contributions from W and N, where W is noise and N is motion. Then if we take a Fourier transform, we can find that the component from the motion stays constant over time, while the component from the noise gets smaller. So to see it more clearly, this is one power spectrum I took. The x-axis is frequency, and y-axis is the power, motion power from one example setup. This red line is the noise floor, and that dot is. And if we do it, if we take the information here, we get a much better signal to noise ratio. So this is one possible setup. I can't play the video, but the camera is here, and the Legos will move the stuff. So my process is you take the frame, detect feature points, track the feature points through the video, and then you find the frequency of maximum power and estimate the depths using the frequency. So this video just moves very slightly in this scene, and from this we can see some results, which you can see the plane here and the face here and objects in the distance. Here's another one on a synthetic video. You can see that from the X movement and the Y movement, it can detect.
I'm curious, what is the length of the baseline?
So in the first setup with the pendulum, the movement was like smaller than. I'll actually just play the video on this slide.
Just tell me the.
It was about like smaller than a centimeter.
Wow. Did you use those checkerboards at all?
I believe it did. Yes, with the feature.
I try to see that.
Okay, I guess we can't play the
That's
video.
it. No, that's okay. Cool. Thank you. Let's go. Maroon. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, do we just like save it for 4 minutes?
No.
Oh, that's good. Go next one.
Maroon ever.
Zero.
Yeah, if you went to the other room, then
It's that.
but
That's it.
we'll be a little bit.
We'll see that.
Alright, so for our project we wanted to, thank you. We wanted to make a player that would take in, I don't know if you guys have played set, it's like a card game where the goal is, given these cards where they have attributes of shape, color, shading, and quantity, to find a set of 3 cards for which all the attributes are either all the same or all different. So we wanted to take something that would take a picture of this raw grid, similar to what you would see when you're actually playing the game, extract the cards, identify them, and then identify all the sets with the goal of it being able to maybe go faster than any player.
So the way we kind of segmented this project was first we have a card detector that finds the cards in the images, separates them out, and then using a card extractor, and then throws them into a bunch of attribute classifiers that we then use to just run a very simple Python script at the end to actually find the sets and return results. So to detect cards, it's a little complex, but what we did is we ran a Sobel filter over the image, so we find the edges. We then run k-means to group all of the different sides of the card so we can take advantage of the natural grid shape. There's a little bit of room for kind of rotation and perspective from the camera, but the cards you can find the different edges quite easily. And then we can use that to run a Shi-Tomasi algorithm, which is basically a variant of the Harris corner detector to find corners on each of these cards and use the gradient information to isolate the 4 points that belong to each card.
Then for the card extractor, we take the calculated corner points, and do a projective transformation to transform this card image into the correct dimensions, and then crop out each of those images from the grid. Right now we're running into some issues when there is a lot of rotation or a strange camera angle. I think we're just running into some OCD issues, but it's working well, as you can see, when it's a straight on image. And then we have 4 linear SVC classifiers to extract the color, shape, quantity, and shading from our extracted card images. These were trained on our gold set of training images that were individual card pictures, and it had really good performance with these training images. As you can see, the extracted images look a little bit different, and we've encountered challenges especially with the color, because under different light conditions, the same colors can appear quite different. So most of our classifiers rely mainly on pixel features, but our card classifier also relies, first thresholds all the non-colored pixels out, and then uses some more color-specific features. So as you can see from the first figure, we had really high accuracy of cross-validation on our gold set of our classifiers, and we're doing pretty well on the extracted card images, but we're still working out some kinks with the color.
Yeah. So obviously that becomes a challenge because if you have even 1 or 2 cards wrong, it's going to identify errant sets. But we are finding that it's running about 15 to 20 seconds, which if you played set before, sometimes you find a set immediately as a human player. Sometimes you stare at the board a long time and you can identify it. So it's realistically going to find some sets before a human person. But as we said, even if we have that 10 out of 12, it's going to identify some spurious sets. Like this is an example of a spurious set we identified because it thought this was a different shape and a different shading. But so far we're happy with the result and we're happy with how robust it's able to extract those cards and hopefully beat us.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. For the color problem, have you guys tried doing color discrete or something? To me, it seems like your main problem comes with images being weirdly colored. Like your gold set is a really perfect white.
It's a perfect scan.
Whereas
yeah.
Scan.
Yeah, because we wanted to make it a perfect kind of vision problem. We don't want to just train on extracted images and try and classify the extracted images. So it's meant to just match up to the sort of the purest graphical representation of the card. But the issue is there's the weird colors, but what that results in is if you have a kind of muted reddish kind of color scheme under natural light, those red and green and purple become far less distinct and kind of blur towards each other. So one of the problems we were seeing in earlier versions before we switched this filtering is that it would never identify purple because the purple was close enough to that red and that green. But we think we're in the right direction with the filtering approach.
Okay. Now, are you Varun?
Yeah,
yes, Varun. All right. Sorry.
Just go back.
Just go back a slide. You have to go back on this computer.
Oh, or
You can use the remote.
Am I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're correct. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, so I'm working in visual relationship detection, which is sort of a problem basically set up to allow sort of machine learning models to gain more information from images and scenes. Basically, it's when you think about object detection, what you're managing to do is sort of make some spatial sense of what's happening in an image. You pick out sort of the objects that exist and how they're laid out. But I guess that as far as sort of humans go, there's a lot more that we can understand from images. So we understand sort of the specific relationships that exist between the objects beyond sort of just their relative location. So I mean that can be something, and each of those relationships sort of has a lot of semantic content. So if you just sort of think about people in clothes, I guess the relationships sort of go beyond just co-location to something with actual meaning. So and I guess in terms of just optimization, relationship detection is a lot harder than object detection. So in general, you have far fewer instances of sort of the same subject object in relationship basically tuple. And in comparison, sort of when you're doing object detection, it becomes a little easier to learn because you just see the same object over and over again. And then also, a lot of relationships are slightly difficult to differentiate between purely on the basis of sort of visual features. So, for instance, it's a little hard to it might be hard for a machine learning model to differentiate between a person standing next to a bike and riding a bike because the actual images are just so similar. And I guess conversely, the same two objects can be in sort of different relationships. So going. Yeah, it did. Okay, so for the purposes of the project, I used visual relationship dataset, which was developed at Stanford. So it consists of 5,000 images, 100 object categories, and 70 common predicates. And this was basically the model I used. So I used the fast RCNN model to extract object bounding boxes, and then used sort of a neural network to classify the objects on the basis of predicates. So and besides that, sort of once you detect objects and try to match them up in every possible way, you end up with a huge number of possible predicates, and so I use non-maximum suppression to reduce the number of bounding boxes. So I guess this is just a diagram of the architecture. Basically, a lot of the work is done of the object detection architecture, and all the work of sort of determining where the objects are is done by this model. And okay. I guess, in terms of results, I've had sort of some problems getting this to work, but yeah, I'll have them by Friday. So I think that's it then.
Not essential. Yeah. Any questions from the audience?
After you do object detection, what are you planning on doing?
Okay, so you create the predicate bounding box by just taking the union and classify the predicate. And to make it easier, you can sort of use word vectors to help determine the relationship.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you.
So we're now on investing in.
Hi everyone, I'm Jesse. My project is reinforcement tracing with HFC model, and I'm also doing this project for like CS231 and CS234 combined. So let me first introduce the target environment. So my target environment is tracing version 0 on OpenAI Gym environment. So basically, you have to complete the track, and every track is randomized for every game, and you get the reward over here if you drive correctly within the boundary. Otherwise, you'll lose point. And some might suspect that this game is really easy, but because this game is based on OpenGL and physics engine, if you go too far from the road, it's really hard to get back, and you will get like minus reward. After having played 10 times, I could make like average of 800 or 850, but there is no one who solved this environment yet in the world, because the standard is like getting 900 points for after 100 games. So there's no one that solved the environment. So directly speaking, this is my best model. So first part is the image preprocessing component. So I first stacked 5 frames of 96 by 96 pixels, and then I tried many different preprocessing strategy. The simplest one was grayscaling, min shifting, and cropping, and this one was the second best. And the best one was just do edge detection using Laplacian, and it gave like slightly better quality edge detected frames than Kenny detector, so it boosted like about 20 points at the end. But when I tried with Hog or like Kenny detector, it actually harmed the performance. To be honest. And then I feed them into second 2-layered, double-layered CNN. And then I plug them into reinforcement learning network, which learns both policy and value at the same time. Just to be more precise, I'm using AQC version of the reinforcement learning model. That is basically multi-threading version of the network. So basically you have this one main brain, and then you have 2 to 8 workers behind, and then they explore their own environment, and they update and sync to the main brain. So here's the results. I tried all the different reinforcement learning models, and as you can see, vanilla AQC model and AQC with some modification, my own modification, improved a lot. And I tested different CNN candidates, and I also experimented with like different number of threads for multi-threading part, and I could figure out that this one gave me the best performance. And this is the plot of the good model and bad model. If you look at the good model, it just overfits for the first red line, and it doesn't do well. But if you look at the good model, you can see that throughout the 1,000 frames, it gets constant every keyword. So let me. No. All right. So now I uploaded this onto the OpenAgent leaderboard, and there's not that many teams yet participated, but mine is like 3rd or 4th of the entire board, which is like about 600. So I'm pretty satisfied with the result. And yeah, so maybe I can try some ensemble models. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm curious, why did your multiprocessing, it actually looked like it did worse than the...
Oh yeah, the like
8-thread version 2 threads, yeah.
That was weird, but my conjecture is that maybe we are exploring too much, so that like neural network is like jiggling around the local minimum or something. That was my conjecture, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. There's no prior work that's talking about like number of threads for AQC models. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hey guys, my name is David, PhD student in CS. I work on computational physics. Specifically, I work on simulating explosions and other extreme physical phenomena. One of the interesting challenges that I've worked on specifically with explosions is accurately modeling and tracking the motion and dynamics of small solid particles as they fly through these complex and highly turbulent flow fields, such as shrapnel emanating from explosions. It turns out that the theory for modeling these types of things is largely empirical and not very robust. So the hope that I pursued during this project this quarter is that by using real-world data that you acquire via computer vision pipeline, by analyzing that data, you can eventually get to the point where you can generate a statistical model for some physical variables of interest that you can then integrate into a simulation, thereby using real-world data to get better simulation results. And so in particular, as sort of a first attempt, one of the variables that I was interested in measuring was aerodynamic drag and drag coefficients for these small solid objects as they're flying through the air. So the setup that I created, I didn't actually blow anything up, but I conducted small-scale representative experiments in my garage. So basically, I have a large acrylic tube that I fill with some fluid, air, water, glycerol, and then I take small solid particles, such as ball bearings, and drop them into the tube. This video is captured using a high-speed camera that shoots at approximately 1,000 frames per second, and then using this video footage, we can perform further analyses. Cool. So in terms of the vision pipeline, the first step that I did was calibration. So I built this little 3D calibration rig, and unfortunately OpenCV was not having it, so I had to more or less roll my own calibration routines. So I used Harris corner detectors with some Euclidean partitioning and clustering, and I made like a little GUI with OpenCV and Qt so you can actually perform the calibration. And it turns out that it works. This is like the RMS projection error for the sample, and it turns out that it works well enough for what I was going for. So the next step down the pipeline then is segmentation. So how do you actually pick out these little objects? So one of the problems is that my high-speed video is really noisy because it's sort of low res. So to filter out this noise, rather than doing just a naive background subtraction, I did like a mixture of Gaussians. So it's basically like temporarily anti-aliasing away all the noise. You can see like it works pretty well. So there are only a couple little spots in noise. There's still some future work to be done with eliminating like false positives. So like, I only want like these bounding boxes, not the bounding box in my hand. So there's still a little manual calling that has to happen there in the pipeline. Next, I did tracking based on these bounding boxes from the segmentation. And this video probably won't play, but you can see that there's a little ball here, and it has a blue bounding box around it. And take my word for it, it falls down. You get the velocity and position data out of this tracking video, which you can then feed in these equations. And basically, velocity here is the input which you get from the tracking, and from that you can just go through the algebra and you get your drag coefficients out, or other variables of interest. So in particular, like here's one quick result. So this is showing some of the velocity that I collected from my experiments. I can go into the details if you're interested, but generally you can see that the velocity data follows roughly a quadratic curve, which is what you'd expect. And yeah, it reaches some like terminal velocity, which you'd also expect. And finally, when the ball like goes out of the screen, like and it can't track it anymore, then like the data goes away. So that's basically where I am right now. So I built the majority of an automated pipeline for collecting this data and analyzing it and generating this data. There's definitely more experimental work to be done, and I think every stage of my pipeline incurs some error that occurs. So it's definitely worth investigating that a little more. But yeah, aside from automating it more and collecting more data, that's about where I am right now. So, thank you. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks. Sarah, Natalia, Daniel, Mike.
So for our project, we decided to build something that could identify and then decode Morse code messages. And we decided to do that just because of an interest in Morse code itself. I think it's like everyone has that kind of fascination, and also I think it's really interesting that we have this technology that predates what we have today, and then at the same time, not only can't understand what it's saying, but we can't even tell when something's being communicated in Morse code. So it's just an interesting like combination of those two very distant technologies.
Oh
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is our basic pipeline. We want to convert a video of blinking lights into like ones and zeros representing like how long the lights are on and when they're off. Then we can convert that into Morse code and then like use some algorithms to like translate the Morse code, like noisy Morse code into an English like description.
Uncovering very important facts.
Yeah. So for our data set, we found a few videos on YouTube of like ships communicating with Morse code, but to get enough training like data, we have to make our own videos of like us blinking a flashlight.
Those are things that we used in the process. So basically for our detection, we implemented a blob detector. We wanted to use specific parameters to try to decide whether or not these blobs were worth our attention. And so we're looking primarily at lights that are luminant, as lights do, that are circular, and we're looking for things of any size, so we can detect things that are very far away or very close. But as you can see, when we do this, we're getting a ton of noise and detecting a lot of different blobs, both that aren't relevant to us, like these down here, or that are detecting the same light, like those up there. So those were issues that we had to deal with.
Yeah, so we did a little bit of analyzing for those blobs to get rid of like a little bit of noise. And so here you can see us get it going from noisy blobs to a little bit less noise, right?
No, that's actually, those are two separate images from when there was noise. All of the extra dots would be taken away, sorry. Those were just the same two images.
Anyway, and then so a big part of our project was the motion tracking aspect of it. So we would get a blob and add it to like a signal object, and the signal object basically had a radius and a center, and then the signal obviously. And so if the new incoming blob was within a certain like percent distance from the radius or the center, we would merge them together greedily. But then we came up with a problem where we would just be tracking like thousands of blobs, but all of them were kind of useless noise because it's either like a light that's always on or just like something that turned on once and never came back because there's this tiny error in the middle of nowhere. So we ran k-means on, we would like every so often run k-means on the variance of the signal because that would give us an indicator on how like good the signal was, how likely it is to be a real signal. We also compared signals that were like correlated with each other to like merge together signals that were of the same light, just reflections or something. We smoothed the image using relaxed total variation by solving a convex equation, and
yeah, and so then once we got this signal, we would end up with something pretty clear, and this is from the video that we were trying to show in the beginning, where it figures out which light is the relevant light and then shows us how long it's on and off. And so after we consolidate that, then we use k-means to determine the difference between dots and dashes and letters and characters. But then we have an issue where if there's word breaks, that really skews it. And so we basically look at our result from that and then determine whether or not we need to rerun it with 3 groups to understand the separate words. And so we just iterate through that a couple times to find the optimal solution. And then... Oh.
Well, you can play well.
So
when the next group comes up.
You can see it's detecting and noticing and only really recording the one that's relevant. Even with some lights in the background and some stuff going on, it, in the end, produces just one message. Yeah.
Any questions? What did that message say?
Sylvia.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Just press next. No, next. I like the arrow.
The mouse is on the other.
The side that goes bottom.
Click out of the video.
But it's not this.
Oh, yeah, move the mouse.
Don't touch the computer. Don't touch the computer.
I haven't
Yes, all future presenters don't touch it.
Okay, my team's project is end-to-end source restoration and object removal. Now consider you are traveling. You may get annoyed when someone stepped in your otherwise impeccable photo. You might want to remove them by Photoshop, but that requires you to crop the target yourself. And you have lots of photos like this, it will be a tedious and time-consuming job. Is there a smarter way to do that? Our project proposes a pipeline to automatically detect person and remove them from photos. The first step in the pipeline is detecting people in the images. Naturally, we turn to a hot detector to perform the task. As you can see from the image, people walking or standing in front of the speaker and the main quad are detected and marked with the green bounding boxes. After obtaining the bounding boxes, we can create masks to perform impending. The second part is the pipeline that detects people in the images. The second part is the pipeline that exemplar-based impending. The gist of this algorithm is pend a patch in target region with a piece taken from the source region from the image, which is called exemplar. And a point problem in exemplar painting is the filling order. There are 2 different filling orders you can see, and the result is totally different. And our filling order is proposed like this. The order is determined by the multiplication of 2 scores. The first score, also known as the confidence term, describes how much a pixel on the field front is in the source region. The second score, also known as the data term, is calculated by non-local mean operator And the intuition behind it is that the structure are sparsely distributed, so neighbor regions with high similarity are more likely to have the same structure layout to the patch to be filled. To accelerate the process, we downsample the images and then feed them to the impending algorithm and use the super resolution to regain a high resolution. And for the post-processing step, we will use on-shot masking to enhance the image quality. As you can see, the parachute, the grape, and the flamingo are removed from the image. So here comes the pipeline. The person detection part detects the person in the image and produces a mask, and the impending part impends the mask in region. As shown on the slide, the girl is removed from the image. And here are more examples to illustrate the pipeline. The image above 2 pedestrians are removed from the streets, and the image below 2 children are removed from the crosswalk, leaving a slight trace of ghost effect, which is caused by the background being too repetitive. And here is a video example. The walking pedestrian is removed from the corridor. If you only look at the above half of the video, the voice basically impended. However, the shadow of the person went undetected and is thus not well impended. So the future work of the project, we first want to turn to the contour segmentation to perform a more precise mask. And shadow are our enemies, so training our homework to account for the shadows of people may help with the pipeline. And the video is challenging because of its high computational task. And we had to use a number of tricks to speed up on our laptop. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions?
For figures, can you get better results by trying to find a single frame, like basically smooth it across? Like basically, yeah, temporal smoothing across the frame
Rather than slide frame.
Rather than frame, right? Because basically you get parts of the person that as they're walking across the screen, you get parts of like strips basically, whether they weren't before, and then as they move, then you get strips of where they were after. And you can just match.
Yeah, that's possible. That is a very great enhancement.
And then another thing is like on the contour of the blocks, if you get the ghosting effects, another thing you do is you try matching the contour of the blocks, so that adds a basically a constraint to you.
Yeah, this impending starts from the contour of the box.
Oh.
As a future work, if it starts from the contour of the person, provides more information.
Yeah, okay. That's
okay, thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, so my name is Sanjay, and so what I would like to do for this project is to upgrade the fly picking robot currently in my lab. And what it basically does is it picks up freely moving flies really fast. And so here's a diagram of it. And there's a local camera to detect, to see the flies. And another camera attached to the picking stage to see the top-down view. And one thing I'd like to take note here is that the picking algorithm doesn't have a tracking system, so whenever it takes a snapshot of a fly and try to move to the fly and fix it, but during that time when the fly moves away, then it has to repeat the same thing over and over again. So for this project, I would like to develop a fly tracking system here. So there were some problems that I had met trying to work on this thing. So first thing was that the local camera, even if it exists, it was not used to locate where the flies are. So and then another one is the detection algorithm in the local camera was very poor. Yeah, just like this. It's not very detecting well, and there was no tracking algorithm tried before. So to solve this, I computed the homography matrix and then use a template-based detection and implement the system. So first, the homography. So what I want to do here is to find the coordinates of the stage by just looking at the image here. So what I have done is to put a calibrated image onto the stage and do the point matching to find the corresponding points, and then do the DLT to get the homography matrix. The accuracy was about RMS of 0.1, so yeah, many points. And then the next one is detection. I used the template-based detection that we have learned from the lecture. And here's the result. And it seems because the template has some shape like how should I say, the curve. So lots of backgrounds were detected as a false positives. And one thing here is that one of the fly didn't detect it at all. So it's probably because the orientation. And then for the tracking, I used the OpenCV library to implement, and it's how it's working. So to conclude, the detection algorithm, it should be probably much better if I use the SBM classifier, or probably it would be better if we make a high resolution camera so that the template of the fly cannot be just like a failure like with background shape. And also for the tracking algorithm, there were some failure cases like this picture. The fly really moves very, very fast, so it would be better if we use a better high frame rate camera. And for future works, I'll probably integrate all of them into the fly robot and make it work. Thank you.
That's a good question. Why are those camera images so weird? Like, it's a very hard problem because the flies are like gray and then the plate is like lighter gray.
Oh, it's because it was performed in the dark, so the flies don't fly away. So it was IR camera that I used. Because otherwise they will just fly away.
Yeah.
They stay calm when it's dark. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Hayato Ikuma. I would like to present my new algorithm for localization microscopy. So single molecule localization microscopy is one of the super resolution microscopy technique. So which means that this imaging system can visualize a structure beyond the optical diffraction limit. The way how it works is that you have a biological sample that is densely labeled with fluorescence, millions of fluorescence molecules, but you have a way to stochastically excite the few number of molecules in one shot, which I am representing here. And by capturing this image, and these bright spots is representing, you can consider that each bright spot is an image of each single molecule. So which means that you can fit the point spread function to each bright spot. By fitting that, that fitting gives you the estimation of the location of molecules. And the estimation of molecules becomes at the accuracy of tens of nanometers. And by accumulating those information from thousands of images, you can reconstruct a single super resolution image that has a resolution of 30 nanometers. And in this final project, I'm going to focus on this estimation part. And this estimation can be performed in multiple ways, but I'm going to focus on an algorithm called ADCG. So this algorithm is going to solve optimization problem that I'm stating here, but it is very similar to the sliding window template matching algorithm. That it is much better than this algorithm because the estimation is going to be performed beyond the size of pixel size. And also it is overcoming the issue of overlapping templates. This algorithm works really well. However, it is not assuming the existence of the background. So this is one of the typical image captured by super resolution microscopy. But as you can see here,
in addition to the molecules, you see a non-uniform background. If there is a background and use a conventional loss function to the algorithm fails and gives you a lot of false detection. So in this final project, I am proposing a new convex loss function that involves estimation of background. And as you have seen here, the background image is a low frequency signal, so that I assume that this background can be represented by a low frequency component of the DCT signal. And by using that orthogonal basis, I can derive the closed form solution for this subproblem, which is going to efficiently be involved in ADCG algorithm. And so this is the result I got from the simulation. As you can see, my algorithm is estimating the location of the molecules very well, but the conventional algorithm is going to give you a lot of false detection. And I also did the analysis on many images, and still it gives you a good result. And of course, I had a lot of difficulties. I was initially thinking that discrete orthogonal polynomial would be good for the estimation of the background, but I couldn't find a good fast algorithm to do that, so I decided to use a DCT transform. And also, I was planning to extend it to a Poisson noise, but my algorithm still considers the Gaussian noise, which is still disappointing.
This to me, when I look at those images, it almost looks like astronomical images. Is this something that the astronomical community has looked at? Finding, let's say, stars or whatever.
Yes. So the initial algorithm proposed for localization microscopy is coming from the astronomical community, but we have adapted in different algorithms as well.
Interesting. Are you going to publish this?
I am hoping so.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I am Mohammed, and my project is about object tracking using distributed robust features and Kalman filter. And the problem that I'm addressing is tracking predefined objects in videos and with real-time applicability. There are many applications in video editing, like changing some of the objects and putting some effects on it. And in real-time phases, there are many applications in augmented reality, virtual reality, and human-computer interaction in general. So there are many ways for object tracking. There are many methods, developed methods. So I'm focusing on point tracking and feature matching techniques. So one of the similar studies is just using SIF features for object recognition and employing Kalman filter for tracking. And in general, SIF and SIF features for recognition, Ransack for motion estimation, and Kalman filter for robust tracking. In a similar topic, but as a different method, using a kernel tracking, using continuous adaptive mean shift, and using SURF features to effectively track and put a bounded box around objects in videos. So my solution is I will give the flow diagram in the upcoming slide, but it has 4 main steps. First one is SURF extraction and matching for object recognition. The second one is least square fitting with outright suppression for motion estimation. And there are some additional steps like learning new features for robust recognition in consecutive frames and Kalman filter for robust tracking. So let us focus on these images right now. As you can see, there is a cropped image of the juice, and this is a different frame in the same video. I rotated artificially to give some challenge. So there is when I do the SURF matching, there is one outlier and 7 inliers. So when I do the just direct symmetric, if I compute the symmetric transform, as you can see in here, green rectangle, it is not as accurate because there is one outlier. So if we calculate the projection error and we apply adaptive thresholding based on the mean and the standard deviation of the projection errors, we can, in most of the cases, we can eliminate the outliers without doing Ransack. This is an alternative method for Ransack, and we can calculate the symmetric transform with error correction. So this is the flow diagram of the proposed algorithm. So it starts with the surf extraction. I'm not doing the surf extraction on the whole image. I will explain in a minute why. After I extract the surf features, I perform object detection by surf matching and then least square fitting with outlier suppression. After that, I integrate this detection algorithm with Kalman tracking. As you can see, this yellow rectangle around the juice, it's the final final results coming out of the Kalman filter. This blue rectangle is giving an estimate on the next frame where the object might going to be. So before going to the next frame, I also like learning some surf features to be used on the consecutive frames. And in surf extraction, in the next frame, I perform like surf extraction within the estimated region instead of the whole region. So if I can just
Try.
Which one?
Use the mouse. Let's play on the, yeah, go for it.
This is like very quick. There is no ransack, it's pretty real time. I mean, it will work real time. And sorry. Just the final results out. These are the computation time per frame. So this square fitting without expression, it's significantly less than the ransack fitting. And this is like just the result of the Kalman filter. People have done this. Instead of extracting surf feature in a whole image, they are just extracting the feature. Also, I'm extracting surf features on the predicted region. So it gives me like real-time applicability, but at the same time, this algorithm heavily depends on surf matching. And there are some like parameters to tune for Kalman filter. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Guys, can we get the chatter going in a second? If you did want to, so it seems that surf is actually the longest time of the.
Yeah.
So would you consider switching to another?
Actually, I was also, I didn't have time, but I was planning to do like some more features, which is like maybe like ultra fast, like fast features, and it like detected like binary detectors, but I didn't have much time. I'm like, is that future work? I think it can be implemented like a very efficient, and future work, I must try this on like a mobile processor with the real time, just how it works in real time. See.
Cool. Thank you. Cool. It's okay, we have a time or two.
One of you is looking at our fingers.
I'm Lucas. I'm a sophomore in CS, and Andrew, I'm also a sophomore. So the goal of our project is to basically create a system where you can take a community and accurately determine identity for a given photo. For example, if you're walking around Stanford, you want to take a picture of someone's face and be able to know who they are in this community. And so the benefits of this is just like a smaller sample size of the people. And so my pipeline for this will generally is 4 steps. One is obtaining the pictures of faces and labels for the training data. Like our end goal of this is to scrape Facebook and be able to get that from people's. The second is the aligning face to frontal perspective. So like there are different faces and different perspectives, and using that to align will allow feature extraction to become more accurate in terms of we're classifying that. And then again, 3 and 4 are just to generate the feature, extract the features, and then classify it using whatever method we're going to use. And so in the technical approach for what we're doing for each of them, for image acquisition, so far we basically have the compiled databases that we're using to test our system so far. So we're using the AT&T database of faces, as well as the labeled faces of wild database, and we're going to move on to like the Facebook scraping a bit later.
Yeah, so the first important thing that we can do to prove our analysis is face alignment. So here we're using dlib, which has a built-in method which takes some picture and it aligns this like 68-point grid onto your face, and this gives us the facial features. And so the next step that we do is we try to pair like the eyes, like basically the features that should match like horizontally, and use that to determine what kind of angle we should rotate the image by. And so this is one of the important parts is to make sure that the image is like rotated properly, because like because these which is the rotated image is not discrete. We want to like kind of go backwards, and from these discrete pixel from the rotated image, we want to calculate like where it corresponds to the original image, and then like from there, like this red dot is like kind of the piece that we're trying to take from the rotated image, and it corresponds to this red dot here. But if you blow it up, like we're trying to take this discrete pixel, which maps to like maybe this coordinate, and then we try to average the 4 pixels by by distance from the 4 that it's from the original unrotated picture. And also, one important part of our feature extraction is we're using eigenfaces. So eigenfaces are basically a low representation of our face images. So you can take like your entire data set and take all the faces and do principal component analysis on all of them. And what you get is like some faces like these, which kind of look like faces. Like you have positive and negative. But yeah, so you combine them and you can use them to make feature vectors.
So another strategy that we're testing out is local binary patterns, which is basically using the basic operator to find the pixels around a certain pixel, using a threshold to see what the areas around it's like, and basically gives structure and texture information. And combining this with like a spatial aspect and combining with histograms in that way, we can add spatial information to this basically texture descriptor. And then the 2 recognition classifiers that we have tested so far are just the basic support vector machine and k-nearest neighbors. The preliminary results we haven't had the full pipeline sort of like put together just yet, but just doing the tests on our individual algorithms, we have our eigenfaces have okay precision and recall, whereas the local binary patterns, which we did for k-means, was able to get like 96% precision and recall with like the 40 people.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is there.
Hi, we are Ankita, Anupriya, and Vinaya, and we're working on object tracking videos, and this is a demo of our tracker on presentation from last class and our mentor report. Tracking is a really complex real-world problem which has many applications in video surveillance, augmented reality, medical imaging. What really is tracking? It's a 3-part problem. The first is detection of objects, the second is connecting detections from frame to frame, and the third is the analysis of the object track. The dataset that we use is the Mod 2016 dataset, which is the benchmark for multiple object tracking. It has 7 training and 7 test videos. And it's from unconstrained environments and with both static and moving cameras. So the next part of our presentation will go into each of the parts of the tracking, what we did for each part.
Okay, the first one is the detection of object, and we have 3 different models for detections. One is the Hall plus SVM, then the HAR-based classifier, and FRCNN. So for the first one, we use the Hall descriptor, which we ran across our image. We use a pre-trained SVM on pedestrian detection, and we use non-maximum suppression. So this worked well for most of the cases, but we observed that in case of occlusions, it did not work so well. So for that, we went on to the feature-based cascade classifier, and this was pre-trained on faces, and as you saw in the video, it worked really well for the faces. Now, the third one and the best model so far for our detectors was the FRCNN. It's a 2-part model which has a region proposal network and an object detection network. Now, it classifies objects based on the chosen regions. In the first part, it's one of the state-of-art detectors. It's a CNN framework that seemed to be really good results.
So for connecting the detections, we basically use Kalman filtering, and as you will see from the video, it works pretty well. The only issue that we found with Kalman filtering was that there are a lot of identity switches. So we decided to, like the bounding box color keeps changing for a particular person, so we decided to add deep appearance feature descriptors to that. And we found that it really works well, and there are hardly any identity switches. And
the next thing we tried is the connecting tracks. At the core is a prediction problem. So what we did was we created it into a neural network formulation where we took the previous n tracks and then looked at the next possible detections it can have, concatenated it, fed it through a feed-forward neural network, and did a softmax over the possible detections. And then the next part is the analysis of the object tracks. This is a non-trivial problem because once you compute the tracks and you are trying to compare ground truth tracks to output tracks, it's an assignment problem that's not easy to solve. So we actually use a Hungarian algorithm, which is a combinatorial optimization algorithm, and computes the intersection over union metric. Next we'll look at results.
So for the results section, we want to draw your attention to the comparison of the 4 models. So this is like two of the metrics, many metrics that we use for our evaluation, MOTA and MOTA and MOTP. And we see that the graphs show for the first one it's the accuracy, and all the models, the 4 models that we have follow a similar trend across all the videos. The second one, MOTP, we see that FRCNN plus Kalman filtering plus deep appearance descriptors is a clear winner amongst all the models.
So this is like comparing the detectors. So as you can see, this person in white shirt, he's not like detected with this Hawk plus SVM detector because of the occlusion problem. But on the right, this is the FRCNN detector, so it pretty much works well even with occluded images. And this is a comparison of our trackers. So this is basically FRCNN with Kalman filtering, and that has deep appearance descriptors as well. Now there would be a woman in red sweater, this one. So if you can see that her identity keeps switching in this particular video, which will be loaded on the left, whereas in this it would be constant. So what happens here is that as people pass through her, the identity changes. So yeah, the color over there is changing, but there is constant because of the appearance features. So.
And that's it, and this is just Sylvia, and thank you to Sylvia and all you guys for your questions.
Anyone has a question?
We can play the video in the background.
This is a hard-based class.
I am curious, what's up with this document?
Yeah, so this is not a this was just trained on face detection. And I think the freeze patterns. So that is we filtered out the frames that had the whiteboard. We just, because we wanted to compress the video to 11 seconds, we filtered out the frames into...
so there's like every 20
20th frame we just filter like that's it. It's like this.
You have to show them that.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, you present. Okay, thanks, down.
Okay. So hi, I'm Cindy,
I'm Ethan. And I'm Vincent.
and we did our project on head pose estimation. And our goal was, given a real-time webcam footage of a user, we wanted to move a cursor in response to head motion. So we wanted to calculate the head pose and then have a cursor follow where our head was pointing at. So before we do a brief overview, notice that we're using a stereo webcam with 2 webcams. And this was so we could get a better estimation of the depth. And so when we calculated where our cursor was on the screen, it was easier to do if we knew the depth. So I guess first, we start out with the 2D images from the webcam. And in order to detect the facial landmarks, we also use the DLive facial landmark detector to get the 68 points, and on the face it looks a bit like this.
Alright, so next comes the part where we try to estimate the pose of a user's head. And this occurs in 2 steps. So first of all, we triangulate the facial key points obtained from both stereo images in order to get 3D locations of points. And we do this using a nonlinear method, like we've covered in class, that minimizes the reprojection error, and produce a point cloud that looks something like this. Next, we want to compute the optimal rotation and translation that maps an initial calibrated model, which we set at the beginning of every run. The user just looks at a point for a few seconds, and then map that original model onto the model that's currently being observed at a given frame. And the way that we do this is using an algorithm known as the Kopsch algorithm, which simply finds a rotation and translation. But we found that
At times, certain points on the head would be localized very poorly by our triangulation algorithm, sometimes multiple centimeters away from where it might be. And so we added a ransack-based approach, which would only find inliers of this rotated transform and minimize only the error on those inliers. And so this produced much more robust results.
And both before and after the rotation and translation estimation, we performed noise filtering. So first, with the 68 key points, we used a sliding window half Gaussian filter on the 2D position of each key point to smooth out noise in estimating those positions. And then we also, after we calculated the rotation and translation for estimating the cursor position, we smoothed the cursor position with a Kalman filter. So here's just a demo of our system working in real time. So you can see that as Vincent moves his head, the cursor moves in response. And you can also see that we have our 2 stereo webcam system mounted on top of the monitor. And we use a wide baseline because we don't need to match key points. The key points are already found. So this gives us better depth estimation. And so what we found on our system as it's working right now is that we got control accuracy within about 30 pixels on this 1080p monitor. But it seemed like getting finer control and more stable control within those 30 pixels would require higher precision and stability of the estimated head pose. But we found that limitations on our system that made attaining those precise poses difficult were one, that because the triangulation is very sensitive to input noise, and two, because the DLib facial landmark detector still has quite a bit of noise on the positions of the facial landmarks, we were kind of like hitting the upper limit of what we could achieve with our current approach. Yeah. Oh, oops.
So something I noticed is that there's a decent amount of lag. I mean, this is just probably because of computation time, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts about how to reduce that time.
So we ran at, this was running at 20 frames per second with the Ransack and the Kalman filtering, but the lag mainly came from the severe noise filtering that we had to perform, because otherwise everything jittered too much.
Thanks, guys.
I'm Sarah, this is Natalie, our mentor for us, thank you. So our project was investigating the problem of music note identification through video, for piano in particular. If you went to any of the other sections, you might have seen that other groups also handled this problem, but we approached it a little bit differently. So we were drawn to this problem initially because we're both musicians and saw this as a potential tool for like both musicians and students of music. So ultimately, we designed an end-to-end system that, given an MP4 video, will then tell you what notes were played during that video for use cases such as recreating that music later. In our research, we looked at a lot of previous work that looks at hand tracking, finger tracking, and even key tracking, but all of them took very different approaches, so we just used this as a starting point.
And so for our data set, we mainly took our videos from YouTube, and the ones that we focused on were tutorial videos, and that was because they were mainly overhead, which helped out in rectification, and so we had less error when we rectified them. And then it was also a kind of more medium speed videos, and so we had fewer problems with occlusion, hand occlusion, as well as missing some of the key presses. So we used mainly tutorial videos. And so we have a pipeline of mainly 3 steps. So pre-processing, and then mapping out where the keys are onto the keyboard, and then actually finding which keys were pressed. And the first step is pre-processing, which includes downloading the video, splitting it into 30 frames per second, as well as then taking the first image without any hands and rectifying, finding the homography matrix of that, cropping it and rectifying it. And in order to do that, we first tried the Huff transform, but that didn't work as well as we wanted because you can see the lines of the keyboard here are very dark at the top, and so we couldn't really fit it very well. And so we eventually created a GUI so that we could have the user click which corners were like the little red points, the corners of the keyboard, as well as type in the first white key, what note it was, which would help later on. And then we applied those parameters to all of the images and used the modified versions of those for our later parts.
So the last part of that part was getting the Sobel image, and so the next part of our pipeline was key detection. And so in key detection, the main objective was to locate all the keys in the view. So, and we took great advantage of the standardization of the shape, size, color, and pattern of the keys on the keyboard. On the left, you can see the Sobel of the binary Sobel of the keyboard was used for white key detection, and just the binary image was for black key detection. So initially, we also tried to use Huff transform or Huff for finding the regions of the white keys. However, not all the gaps were well defined, so instead we found averages of widths in the middle of the keyboard and used that to map them across the whole width of the keyboard. For black keys, as you can see, the contrast made the black regions quite clear, so we were able to just scan across and map black regions to black keys.
And then the final part was actually finding the differences between the frames. We tested first with iterations of 5 consecutive frames and then with 3 to see the difference. And then we used OpenCV and we were able to find the difference between them. This shows this key was pressed here and then also the hand moved a little bit. That was the knee or something. And then we decided that the best way to actually find which key was pressed is to then go across, scan at a certain point in the image and find where the intensity value jumps above a certain threshold. And then we mapped the coordinates to the keys that we talked about in the next section.
So right now we're working on results.
Okay, let's go on. Any questions from the audience? The question is, how fast does this run? I mean, it seems like a lot of the methods that you're using are either scanning across lines, which I would think intuitively to be very fast, but what would you explain?
Extremely quickly. It takes about like a second to produce.
Well, 1 second is huge, right?
Well, yeah.
It's definitely can be optimized. We are using as many built-in features of like NumPy instead of doing our own for loops. We just have so many pictures. We're using data sets of 8,000 images for one of those. And then taking every 5 frames, so it narrows it down a lot more.
I think our biggest room for growth is often like completely automating the beginning pre-processing so that we don't have any user input besides that.
That's it.
My project is real time gaze tracking. And a little bit background. So gaze tracking is just to track where you are looking at the screen. And it has applications in HCI, for example, to help a disabled person to control computer. And then in virtual reality, also a lot of people use it in research, cognitive neuroscience, and psychology, because it's the gaze is actually related to memory and attention. So the current commercial solution requires expensive and special head mounting hardware like this one. It actually takes like really high definition of the eye. So here we propose to, of course it's expensive and inconvenient. Here we propose to track the human gaze. You can just use the webcam. Actually it's quite difficult because first of all the image produced by the webcam is low contrast and the image varies a lot. Due to lighting condition, and the in the webcam is actually really small. It usually varies from 30 to 60 pixels. And when you're looking at the screen, actually the range of the center of the pupil is even smaller. It's like around 10 to 15 pixels. So even if you make a small errors here, you will produce a round error on the actual gaze. And also, even if a person looking at the fixed position, the eye actually rapidly moves. Due to this So our proposed method is just first to extract some features from the webcam camera. First we do face, of course, we do face detection, and then we align the face landmark marks, and then we try to infer the pupil center. So from the aligned face landmarks, we compute the head pose, and then we obtain the output, just the actual gaze from calibration, and then we try to train a robust regression model, considering like the head outliers. And then we compute the features in real time and just compute the output, just query it, face query it. So face detection is actually pretty simple. So we just use the famous Hewlett and Jones algorithm. Yeah, the problem is we need to use a different cascade for eyes with glasses and eyes without. And then also like the face movement is a bit limited. We just use one cascade for the face. And yeah, just people already talked about this, I guess. So it's just face landmark tracking. So we need this to infer to estimate the accurate reference point, and then also to estimate the face pose, the head pose. So I'll actually try to bound for this. Actually find this one pretty fast, so that's why we used it. So the problem with this is actually, for our purpose, it's sufficient for most landmarks, but except for eye corners, because yeah, because there we see it's like really important. And also we need to infer the pupil center. We implement this method. So the in this paper, and the method is actually very simple. It's just like based on the conclusion that the center of the circle will maximize this objective, which is the grad times the gradient. And we find this the gradient around the overall gradient. So we need to find this gradient by taking just the peak of the gradient histogram. Yeah, the problem is actually just due to the cards. The gaze, the pupil center actually varies, jumps a lot, and then we need to perform an exponential weighted moving average for the pupil center positions. And also, yeah, we already talked about this. We also need to compute the head pose. Okay. Yeah.
Can you quickly skip if you have any results?
Yeah. So So we train on like 100 basic data points and the kernel is 75. And the mean is 140 pixels and the median is 88. And we allow like we head movement and everything. Yeah, it's actually comparable to like web laser, and it's like this is basically the best basic we're trying. We implemented this from everything from scratch. Cool. Yeah, this is like the main thing to improve is actually just to our own.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, guys.
We should probably get the view done.
Sorry.
Because we want to get out the feedback like
have a lot of
we actually have to get it. I'll go on like I'll have a temporary sheet of my day, so we'll just about it. Yeah.